This is an Irreverent podcast. Check out irreverent.fm for shows from all our friends. Hello and welcome to Exvangelical, a show exploring the world inside and outside the evangelical subculture. I'm your host, Blake Chastain. It's been about a month since I released an episode into the feed, and that's largely been because I took some time off and then also have been working on finishing up the first draft of my manuscript for my book that will be coming out. It's penciled to come out next year. So I apologize for not having any shows here in the queue ready for you, but that is the reason for the delay and for the fact that I haven't had anything new. However, I did want to resurface an interview that I did several years ago with David Bazan. The listeners of this show are likely very familiar with who David Bazan is. He is the lead singer of the band Pedro the Lion and also performed under his own name for around a decade. Bazan's music, what it means to me, can really not really be overstated. It was the type of music that I needed back in the early 2000s as a Christian college student, trying to understand my place in evangelicalism and also the sort of pathways out. Bazan and many other people were the types of people that forged those paths before things like podcasting, before TikTok, before Instagram. He was being honest about his faith in the music that he was producing and his struggles with it, and that has reached and influenced so many people's lives. And if you are familiar with him, then you likely know what I mean. I had the opportunity to have a conversation with him back in the fall of 2017, just over a year after I had started this podcast. And it was an absolutely surreal experience at the time. And even thinking back on it now, it remains incredibly surreal, excuse me. We actually recorded this conversation in his car between shows that he was doing a living room tour at the time. And I was able to ask someone whose work meant so much to me just exactly what sort of went into it. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation from the archive, so to speak, while I continue to take time to work on the manuscript and the time that I usually give towards podcast production and other projects. July 2022 actually marked 6 years of this show being in production, and there have been times when I've had to step away, but by and large, this show has stayed in production since July 2016, and so much has changed since then, and I'm always grateful for my small part in the environment that has blossomed since then around conversations about what we now call deconstruction or what have you. What it means to reckon with white evangelical influence in our lives and in society. So I'm very thankful. I will drop a link to a essay that I wrote, sort of marking the occasion, over at the Post-Evangelical Post. I'll put that in the show notes. And you'll also find links to some of Bazan's long discography in the show notes as well as a link to the original show, which is later back in the feed in 2017. If you want to support my work, you can do so via the Post-Evangelical Post. That is a Substack. And I use Substack because I also write in addition to podcasting. So that's why I don't use a platform like Patreon. And for some other reasons too, they're really technical. I won't get into it. But nevertheless, if you want to support this show, you can do so at $4, $6, or $8 a month. I donate 25% of net revenue from those subscriptions to two organizations, the Religious Exemption Accountability Project and White Homework. You can learn more about that at postevangelicalpost.com, and you can subscribe for free as well. What you get with a paid subscription is access to ad-free podcast feeds, as well as access to Discord and some other things that will be coming later in the year. So without further ado, please enjoy this conversation with David Bazan. Hello and welcome to Exvangelical. I'm your host, Blake Chastain. My guest this week is David Bazan. I'm very excited to share this conversation with you because David is my favorite musician. Listeners to this show will likely know him from both his solo work as well as from his band, Pedro the Lion. David's been singing and performing songs about his relationship to faith and doubt throughout his entire career. The song you hear underneath this intro is called Hard to Be, which is really the unofficial theme song for this podcast. You'll hear samples of other songs from his discography throughout the episode. David and I met here in Chicago between two living room shows he was doing in the area last month. We ended up recording this interview in his car with a single mic between us as we both sat in front seats. So if you hear people rustling around in a parking lot or the sound of doors opening and shutting, that sort of thing, just know that that's part of the ambiance we were going for, and you know what? Damn, it sounds kind of good. We also had to stop recording at one point near the end, and the audio quality when we come back is a little different, but we did what we could. Throughout the conversation, though, we talk a lot about David's upbringing in the Pentecostal tradition, how he processes his own faith and doubt publicly through music, how evangelicalism taught him to distrust his body, Trump and evangelicalism, and a lot more. I'm really happy I got to have this conversation, and happier still that I get to share it with you. David is currently on tour right now in the South and the Midwest, so check out his tour info at davidbazan.com/shows. If you're familiar with David's music already, you may have heard that he's going to begin touring again with the Pedro the Lion moniker, which is super exciting news. We end up talking about this at the end of the interview as well. The first Pedro tour dates start in December in the Pacific Northwest, and most of them are actually already sold out, but check out davidbazan.com/shows for more details about future dates. Be sure to support David's music. Buy his records, see his shows, buy his merch, listen to his tracks on Spotify and elsewhere. Just listen to his music. It's amazing. Support him. And you can also follow him on Twitter, @DavidBazan. If you want to support this show, you can do so by leaving an iTunes review or via Patreon at patreon.com/exvangelicalpod. You can also find other Exvangelicals to talk with in our closed Facebook group, also named Exvangelical. We have over 1,100 members at current count, which is amazing. You can also follow me on Twitter @brchastain, and you can follow the show on Twitter @exvangelicalpod. All right, everyone, let's get into it.
Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
Hello. All right. I think that's...
Yeah, you're much louder on 1, I'm much louder on 2.
Great. Awesome. Cool. Well, you want to get going?
Yeah, I'm down.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'll leave a few seconds in the edit just so I can see it, and then I'll do a little intro.
Cool.
And we'll sort of get into it. Hi everybody, welcome back to Exvangelical. My guest this week is the musician David Bazan, who's known for recording under his own name, as well as Pedro the Lion, Headphones, Low Tom, and the Undertow Orchestra. Welcome to the show, David.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks, I really appreciate it. It's an honor to talk to you. So where we usually start is really just talking really about where you're from, what your background is, and since you are known for your music, I'd also really love to know when you really started getting interested in music.
Yeah. So I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. I was born there, and I lived in Phoenix until I was 12. After 6th grade, we moved then to like Havasu City, Arizona, and I was there for 7th grade, and then 8th grade, we moved to Santa Cruz, California, or nearby. And then 9th grade, we were in Paradise, California. And then by 10th grade, I was in Seattle, which is where I've lived pretty much ever since.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we moved to Seattle in 91. And I moved away from there briefly after high school, but I came back as quickly as I could. It feels like my home.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So throughout that time, like growing up, was your family involved in a church?
Oh yeah, my dad was the music pastor. That was what his job was. He went to college for that, and we were in the Assemblies of God denomination, which is Pentecostal, And yeah, they were kind of. Both my parents were pretty reserved in terms of their Pentecostal expression. And because of that, and because my dad was the music pastor, my experience at church was always, kind of mild in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, we, from the time I was 4 to the time that I was 11, we lived in a house that was about a quarter of a mile away from the church that we attended and that my dad was the music pastor of, and basically did all the computer kind of work in the office to just helped with all that stuff. And he had a ton of responsibility there. And then the school that I went to was a Christian school, and it was in the same parking lot as the in the old church building, basically. And so my whole world was just this within a quarter of a mile of I just went to school and church and home, and it was pretty great. I mean, I liked the little kingdom that I lived in.
Yeah. So you said that it was sort of mild. I'm always very interested in like sort of PK people's experiences, because your mileage may vary, really. So
it's really true. And as a music pastor, you don't have the same classic dynamics as a pastor's kid as you might be more likely to see in the actual preacher's kid.
Right. Yeah.
There's a lot more pressure on the preacher's kid, I feel like, to be certain ways, and that wasn't really a factor in our church because the preacher was so much older. His kids were all grown, and so I didn't really have like
that expectation,
or even like a buddy growing up who got all that kind of who was the senior pastor's kid.
Yeah.
But we just my experience was that we were at the church all the time, and we liked it. My dad was one who just really believed in meeting the needs of the people, which meant visitation and helping, families who were struggling in various ways with, food and whatnot. And the holidays were, we went and sang carols for shut-ins, and we just, it seemed like that the way that my dad was is that being a pastor was about, helping people and meeting their needs. And because he was the music pastor, for him that meant cultivating the musicians that were in the church to do the roles that were available on stage, not hiring ringers and that sort of thing. And so you have a music program that's a little janky if you do that, as opposed to if you hire, ringers, then you can make a band that sounds really great, and people are. It's like a key selling point of a seeker-sensitive church. To
right.
Have this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
I grew up with sort of the opposite of that, and as a value, and my experience. It was. I learned about the Bible in Sunday school and in children's church, and my children's church pastor was this really wonderful lady who, taught us was good with values and things, like taught us how to basically, if when we kind of wandered into having a bad attitude about something, she was really loving and kind of firm and genuinely like not shaming, or she just was cool. But we went to like kids camp, and that would be a dozen or more churches sent all their kids from around the district or whatever, and that was when the messaging would start to get a little wonky and focused on tongues talking and
really?
This kind of thing, which there was tongues talking in church.
Yeah.
Growing up, there was tongues and interpretation, just sort of randomly at different points. Somebody would just sort of interrupt with either a word from the Lord that they were sort of, reciting or whatever, or
right.
There would be somebody who's, just hauls off with the just starts talking gibberish. And then there would be a little, usually afterward, there would be a little, break, a little moment, a beat of silence while everybody's waiting for the interpretation. And then somebody else would be moved by the Spirit, ostensibly, to give the interpretation, which was, any number of nonsensical, sometimes on point, sometimes just like pet peeve, like phraseology, that people would string together. And generally, it seemed like nonsense at the time, but I was trying to be cool, like good about it. And
yeah, even back then when you were a kid, you were
Yeah.
still a little on the fence about it.
It just was like, I wouldn't do that. Like,
right.
I mean, it just seemed, I don't know.
Yeah.
It never really seemed all that helpful.
Yeah. So these youth retreats or camps or whatever, that's where you would get the more like party line sort of stuff, or as far as...
Well, yeah, I mean, the trick with Pentecostalism is it's just not that theologically rigorous, and so it really is just pet peeves, that, or the preaching is just sort of personal axes to grind, and they're preaching from the Bible, but they just choose whatever they're going to do, but there isn't like you could go pretty far afield in your preaching in the subject matter, all the way into health and wealth and this kind of thing within the Assemblies of God, and there just wasn't a really strong framework of orthodoxy or something like this to sort of bounce people back to some kind of center.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would be in Pentecostalism, because
Yeah.
its main distinctions are kind of
those emotional
outlandish.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, the main distinctions are that the initial physical evidence of being filled with the Holy Spirit is speaking in tongues for everybody. And that being filled with the Spirit is a second blessing after salvation. That, growing up, there was a little bit of a second-class citizenship to not speaking in tongues.
Yeah.
And they would say over and over again, like, you're not a second-class citizen, but it really was the case that if you were more spiritual or whatever, then you would kind of have this thing. And, so that's one of the key differences between it and just run-of-the-mill evangelicalism, and then some end times bullshit.
Yeah.
As Pre-millennialism, I think, is the
right.
Is what they are in terms of end times theology. Though, if I did know what that meant precisely, which I'm sure I could tell you about it, but I just couldn't care.
It's left behind.
I just couldn't care less. It's a waste of.
Yeah.
So yeah, before youth group, we were at these camps, and we just started to be exposed to things that were not always helpful. And I'm sure that there was things that were going on that were potentially not helpful just because of the impact of the tradition itself. But in my children's church in the pastors that I kind of spent the most time with growing up, I was really lucky. Connie Huffer, our children's pastor, was just a really sweet, very helpful lady. And then in youth group, years later, once I got to Seattle finally, I had some great ones in between too, but the guy, Steve Zemke, that was our youth pastor when I was in high school, just real helpful guy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, genuinely. Didn't give us trouble for preferring to listen to non-Christian music. He was like, I understand Christian music is horrible. He wasn't even trying to... It was cool because he just was... Personally, he had a different style than could be like the cool guy, like the hip.
Right.
Like, I don't know how to describe it, but in fact, Steve was quite hip, and but it was just he was sophisticated and wasn't trying to pretend like he was something that he wasn't. He was just like, I don't listen to that. Why would I insist that I like this other stuff. And he did he turned me on to Phil Keaggy and some things like this, but also other things that weren't Christian. So I was really lucky in that way, and it kind of kept me around, I think, a little longer, that I had such positive experiences at intervals growing up.
Right.
Genuinely good folks that I looked up to in many ways,
mm-hmm.
who were in charge of me.
Yeah.
That's not most people's experience.
Yeah, and I mean that is a fortunate experience for sure.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that like you felt like Pentecostalism wasn't like theologically rigorous. Was that something that you felt like you were aware of as a kid, or is that just in hindsight?
In hindsight, yeah. No, I didn't really know any other way of doing that, and I was interested in theology as I got older. In a way, I mean, I liked the ideas, and I liked understanding how they fit together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If this plus this equaled this, then whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I think once I got to college, I went to a Pentecostal Assemblies of God liberal arts college, if that is even possible. It is possible. I went there, and I did get. It was a good sort of way station for me to. I needed some middle ground between just growing up in this bubble and then kind of interacting with the rest of the world. I needed something, and Christian college was really helpful for me because it got me out of the extreme bubble that I had grown up in, and there's just, as reasonable as the people were that were around me, it's still sort of a monoculture.
Yeah.
So it was cool to get just a bunch of different ideas, different parts of the wider tradition that I just was not aware of, that were really helpful in getting me to a place of peace, I guess, eventually. But I had no idea in high school, and then even in college, it was a slow, incremental kind of process where I would have these massive paradigm shifts that felt massive to me, but they were all still within, like, a very small percentage of...
Yeah, absolutely.
As
another Christian college kid, yeah.
Yeah, just like nothing revolutionary is happening there, but like I was like, what the fuck? Just rocked. I heard the song Come Thou Fount for the first time there in a Christian doctrine class. We had to sing it every day for like a couple, 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. That was revolutionary for me. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. That kind of confession I was not familiar with being allowed or being able to even admit those things kind of... it sounds strange, but it just...
Yeah, I think there's something to that idea that you can't even acknowledge that feeling is even there.
Yeah.
And it feels like weirdly forbidden, and...
It was scandalous feeling, really.
Yeah,
And it opened my mind up, and it really broke me. Like it was quite emotional when it hit me in class the first time. Just like, wait, what? It just gave me so much hope,
Yeah.
And so there were little things like that I needed along the way to just kind of start to put me back together in a way.
Lord, could someone please tell me the story of sinners ransomed from the fall? I still have never seen you, and some days I don't love you at all.
Yeah, because now I can see that regardless of people's desire to or not to do this, it really, my experience with Pentecostalism and evangelical Christianity is that it pounded my intuition right out of me.
Mm-hmm. It made you want to doubt yourself? Or?
The messages that were coming from my body about things were not viewed as valid, or I just was somebody else's totally, and I was supposed to lean on that somebody else's understanding and not my own. And there's just like a million different messages about like, don't listen to your body, don't listen to to any of the voices in your head. Really, you're trying to connect with God and be His. And I don't know what the mechanisms were exactly that happened, but I just recently found myself just totally devoid of a connection with my own intuition in a great many ways. And I started to, through the help of a buddy, a couple of friends, we were talking about this stuff, and I was like, well, wait, okay. So now I can look back and because I have this feeling that I've been on like a journey to where I am now, and that all of that upbringing was a part of that journey.
Yeah.
And there were helpful tools along the way within that culture to help me basically out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. That's why it feels odd to be talking about it like then. And then I started getting the help that I needed.
Yeah.
It's like, from what? Like, well, just I guess from growing up Christian in a way.
Yeah.
And I've never even felt that way about it before. Just recently, just in the last probably 6 or 8 months or year, where I can look at it and think, man, there were some things that being a part of that culture did that were really unhelpful. And I think that me really having a really poor relationship with my own intuition about things was one of the results of it. And I grew up in a way that it even feels strange to talk about that, because it doesn't seem like, well, what value is your intuition? Now I kind of see that it's your compass. I mean, it's
right.
Yeah. And I also see that a lot of the people that raised me, they've given up that compass to the sort of authority they see at the center of the culture, which they believe is God and Jesus or whatever. But it ain't that. I mean, God and Jesus didn't tell them to vote for Trump and to keep supporting him. It's some other distortion of all that stuff. And so I can see. Yeah, I just see that I'm coming to slowly understand the value of one's intuition. And it's a foreign thing for me.
Yeah. I'd love to hear more about what you've said about your connection to your body. Like, as far as, actually, heard you talk on the Horatio with Horatio Sands, really about that too, about how, like, you felt a sort of disconnection between your own body, and you also mentioned your own intuition, that this is something that, like, that you think, like, evangelicalism in particular, really really impacted. And within that other conversation, you mentioned that, like, you actually sort of processed things mentally several years ago, but are now coming to this point where you feel like you're, like, the bodily part of that equation is going through its own sort of process.
Yeah, it's kind of landing in my body in a way that, and again, all that language is so kind of foreign, and I was kind of raised to despise all of that kind of, they would have said, like, new agey talk, I guess, when I was real young, but just any of that, like, any of that language, and so it feels funny even now, but yeah, it feels like it just kind of, so my perception, and I haven't been to therapy or anything about this, but it seems like that I did have some connection with my body that kind of kept me connected enough because I played music. And as cerebral as you end up being with everything, with music, eventually you have to just listen to your body, and you just have to go with that, And drumming, especially, you're not thinking about notes, you're not thinking about pitch, or you're just feeling and responding, and that was really, I think, helpful to have had, because I think it kept a part of that alive that might have just been might have just decimated it completely. But now I have a way back in to that, because even though there's a lot of ways in which I feel like my intuition and even just the idea of listening to your body, maybe though I'm using those things interchangeably, the way that I'm talking about them, as wrong as that might be, I don't know. But just the idea of listening to your body, it was expressly forbidden to listen to your body in so many ways.
Yeah.
Because your body was you just want to fuck. That's all that your body was gonna want to do. And sure, that is one thing that your body wants to do, but there's a lot of other. It's not the loudest voice most of the time, and there's just a lot of cues about when to stop taking abuse, for instance, and when to, if you can tune in. And I haven't done that except for when I'm playing music, and even then there's like a tension there where so many other musicians that I played with were so much more intuitive, musicians, and I had to kind of come at things from a point of knowledge sometimes. But yeah, that was a connection that I was able to keep with it. But Christianity, how does it do it? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think there's part of it that's like, there's like this, especially in evangelicalism, that makes you want to despise the body. Like, despise, you don't want to lust. You don't want to lust in your mind because you're having an affair.
Right.
You take those sayings, and then you take Paul's craziness and apply that to a hormonal teenage body, and then you internalize those things so early, and then
well, there weren't any voices saying. There wasn't anybody saying that it's okay to masturbate. You know what I mean? Sometimes people were kind of like grown-ups would be like, whatever. But it would have been really helpful if the youth pastor just sat us down and said, hey, look, a lot of tension building up around there. It's okay to do that, Try to, I don't know what they would have needed to say, like try to stay away from the really filthy porn, or I don't.
Yeah, I know. Slippery slope there.
Yeah, but just just somebody with real world understanding, like if these kids feel guilty for doing this, it's going to harm them, you could let them off the hook for that.
They might have burned, but the priests were all taking turns showing nuns what they had discerned about their bodies in the dark. They carried on from the evening until the dawn, like they should have been all along, making harmless sparks instead of breaking little boys' hearts. And God knows if you notice the millions of small holes and ponder the weight of an apple compared to the trouble we're in.
This is
It's messed up.
it's like master your own body or something. And that's the way in which you do it. Is by denying, to your point, denying your body.
Denying. Well, and that's self-denial is a theme, and one that I still am needing to kind of unravel which parts I still like, because I still respond to some of that. Mm-hmm. Riches I heed not, nor man's empty praise. Like, yeah, that's still for me. The conclusion, not so much, but yeah, trying to figure that out.
So that's actually from Be Thou My Vision, which was one of your earlier songs that you recorded. Let's talk a bit about your music. And, well, I discovered your music around 2001, 2002. This is when I was at Christian school and, had a bit of a jam band, and, a guy that sang sometimes with us told me about your music. We were at Indiana Wesleyan, which was too conservative for you. They have a very aggressive student development board, so I'm sure so I saw you at Taylor, which was a bit more open. And
just a bit, though.
Just a smidge. Their kids could watch rated R movies. We couldn't.
Wow. Yeah, we couldn't at Northwest College.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you know what it is. So anyways, throughout that period, you went from, songs on your records, songs like Secrets of the Easy Yoke, which I know you don't perform anymore, and then songs like Rejoice on Control, and then The Fleecing, which you've actually changed over time. Mm-hmm. So, specifically within that sort of period where you had this really very public, and this period where you're really reckoning with things in a very public way, that you're changing your mind. Mm-hmm. What was going on sort of in your life that was spurring that?
Well, I think the way that it worked was that as Bush was coming to power and really marshaling the troops in a evangelical Christian sense.
Yeah.
I found myself wanting to kind of drill down deeper into my understanding of Christianity, because I wanted to combat these people. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, okay, well, it's time to get serious about this, really serious. And so I thought, well, where do you start? And I thought, okay, well, here's all these assumptions that are kind of underlying this system. I should go through and just shore all of that up: inerrancy and the authority of Scripture and hell and just whatever it was going to be. I needed to go through and just cross every T and dot every I. And as I started to go into those things, I just realized, just pull one little thread and a few things just started to kind of fall apart.
Yeah.
And I just kind of realized inerrancy, I just couldn't find a compelling argument for inerrancy anywhere except my desperate need for inerrancy.
Right.
Of the Bible or whatever. And so that kind of started to slip, and hell was gone maybe even before that. And then in the midst of all that, we had our first kid, and that experience kind of, it just made original sin unbelievable to me.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought, I'm so much less invested in this person than a creator God would ostensibly be with these brand new creations that he's, is made to he's not even their parent so much as just like this companion. But as a parent, I just thought but also described as a parent. I mean,
right, yeah.
And I just thought there's nothing that she could do that would cause me to want to disassociate myself with her for any amount of time. There just isn't, because I understand her, what she is. She doesn't know. She's innocent, and I just kind of thought, if not knowing the difference between good and evil is not the definition of innocent, I don't really know what is. Would I, in her innocence, cast her out as a child if she doesn't know the difference between right and wrong?
Right. Yeah.
And that's literally what she's getting in trouble for. It's
right.
It's just insane. I mean, it's just totally insane. I mean, sure, that could happen, but not the hero of the story isn't going to do this. You know what I mean?
Right.
Not and stay the hero. This is a dick move. Unnecessary.
Yeah.
Just not necessary.
Right.
That it's a myth that's utterly fiction is reassuring, because you think, what a prick. I'm glad this prick isn't around.
Yeah.
Because I feel scared.
Yeah, you mess up once and you're fucked.
And then they're gonna, but he means to make it right. Okay, so thousands and thousands of years and billions of people just in agony on the way. No, none of it is believable from a being that I am gonna worship, because I love that being, because I'm moved by that being. And slowly but surely started to see, like, oh, right, God in the Bible was this ancient, like, pounding fists on the ground, because that's what moved ancient people. Ancient people were displays of power is what moved them, apparently. And displays of power don't move me.
Mm-hmm.
They don't move the modern person. We've seen all that.
Right.
Cool, you're... Coincidentally, the scale that you created us at means that you dwarf us, and you're going to use that to, like, scare us into believing in you? Fuck you. No. Sure, like, you can scare us into it, but you're not going to inspire love in us.
Right.
Unless, we're just abused people who develop Stockholm Syndrome, for our captor. Having a kid was just the first time that I just started thinking about it, like, no, this does not make sense. And so, it was all a part of that little trying to drill down deeper into it to get more serious, and it kind of it backfired a little bit. And I was pretty heartbroken. It wasn't what I wanted.
Right. And you in the fleecing, where you actually change it, you actually say, and that's why I don't believe and why I grieved it pretty hard. And so, that's a really painful process for, most people that go through it.
Yeah.
If they're invested in it and something falls apart, it's no small thing.
Yeah, something at the core of your being.
Yeah.
That you sort of have arranged all the furniture around this kind of idea, and also just a way of doing what now might be self-talk, but just a way of interacting. By the end, I was definitely, prayer without ceasing wasn't the way that they think. Like I just was constantly interacting with this set of ideas and expressing gratitude all the time, and when that started to fall apart, it was I had to really I felt really vulnerable, and I had to kind of like kind of clinch up or kind of feel like I had to kind of protect myself. And then I think I don't want to be hard-hearted, and so then you open back up, and it was very, it was a confusing process.
Right.
And everybody around you, of course, wants you to give an answer for why.
Yeah.
Some demand an answer,
Yeah.
They're very offended.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you try, sometimes I tried, and other times I just was like, because I don't,
Yeah.
Why don't I believe? Because it's not believable to me anymore, I guess,
Yeah.
But when that's all you have, they want an apologetic for some new way. And it's tough. And it was helpful for me to realize that, like, I'm having to use all this force to pull myself away from this very powerful magnet, but I want to land right in the middle. You know what I mean? Like to pull, and then have enough control to like not have the pendulum swing way out one way or way. Like I wanted to be kind of sane about it, but there's no way to do that in a sane way. You're gonna pull too hard and have to swing back, and it's just a process.
Yeah.
That pride makes difficult if you wanted to look graceful or something, because it's just it's painful and ugly, and it's this weird toxic thing that we have to decouple ourselves from in order to kind of, I don't even know, I feel like I'm in the middle of the process still in a lot of ways.
Yeah. One phrase that I'm sort of playing that keeps coming to mind for me is this idea of like wholeness over holiness. It's like like you want to be able to feel like a whole person, and sometimes evangelicalism can deny you that unless you're a very particular type of person.
Yeah.
I mean, it works for a lot of people, I guess, or at least some people. But
there's people in my life who I'm close to who are pretty much just still straight down the middle with it, and we grew up pretty close together, and it's strange to see, I assume that it's working for them. But there's a tension because it's not working for a lot of other people around them, and so that's a hard thing.
Yeah.
But how do some people get through it and it's fine, and other people they open themselves up in different ways to it, or need something different from it or something, and end up getting kind of turned around and hurt.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know why. More and more, I just kind of think that it's just bad. I mean, I've been pretty reticent to even... I feel like over the years, even if I've been, not a believer myself, I've been pretty, like, kind of, but, whatever works for you kind of thing. And I find myself feeling that way less and less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really hard, especially with evangelicalism and the fruits of it, especially.
The recent fruits, I think, are really hard to deny.
Yeah.
It's painful.
Yeah.
But and that's sad to me. It's sad that I feel the way that I do. Because I almost kind of feel like, that it's just bad and that you need to get out of it. But I guess I'm not willing to evangelize in that way. I don't know if that's kind of stupid to say it that way even, but for some reason I don't know, I'm still in a sad phase from it. It was not for me for a long time, but I still saw the potential for some good, and maybe it's just a really bad swing, but the more that I learn and the more that I read and listen the more it just seems like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Seems bad.
Yeah. One of the songs that I've actually been listening to of yours a lot since November has actually been People on Strange Negotiations, because it seems like that's really your exploration of like this idea that the people that you grew up with were good people. They were doing good things, but then some nasty fucking thing happens since then.
Yeah.
And like all of a sudden, either whether it's boomers or something, or I don't know, like all of a sudden their political desire for power is the thing that excuses supporting Trump and he's a serial sex assaulter and you can't say anything.
No, there's nothing good to say about the man. I mean, literally, there's just not. There's nothing good in him that I've been able to see. He's not good to his family. He's not good to. He has no friends of any kind. You know.
Yeah, and the fact that he was supported by 81%. That. So for me, like your song actually has been very, in a number of ways, cathartic, because it's definitely something that it feels like. I mean, that song is a few years old too. It's
it was
like
in
that
2011.
That was a dormant. That song is, prescient.
Well, there was
who are these people blaming their sins on the fall? Who are these people? If I'm honest with myself at all, these are my people. Man, what else can I say? You are my people. We're the same in so many ways. Then your eyes turned green and you broke the machine. But when handed to you, it's still kind of functioning. And I know that it's dangerous to judge, but man, you gotta find the truth. And when you find that truth, don't budge until the truth you found begins to change. And it does, I know. When you love the
It
truth
is the most recent episode of this horrible show is the most extreme example of it. But the whole time you're hearing this drum being beat, like since I was in 7th grade, I found somebody, my mom maybe bought The Light and the Glory. And,
I read that in college.
And I flipped it over, and there's just something about. I think in Christian school, I got turned on to. We were learning about due process, and it just struck me that, like, wow, this is foundational. Like, you can't have a free society without this.
Right.
That there was these handful of things, and in thinking about due process and what it meant and what it implied for the way that you dealt with ideas and everything in general, it just sort of like, it spawned something in me that a few years later, I flip over The Light and the Glory, and I'm reading the back of it, and I had just taken, in the 2 or 3 years prior, I'd taken American history at a Christian school, So I flip over The Light and the Glory, and I just read the blurbs on the back and the description of it, and I just, in my body, I just know, like, that's not quite right.
Yeah.
They're twisting it somehow. This is twisted. And, people would say, oh, no, you heard it twisted. This is untwisted. No, I heard a Christian school, like a Becca, book version of American history, and this, I'm sure that it was inspired by it, but then when I just saw the way that it was described in the back, I just knew, like, this is wrong. I don't exactly know how it's wrong, but it just felt wrong, and then here we are. You know what I mean? For me, that was sort of the first moment where I saw the machine.
Yeah.
When I saw Christianity be the thing that it is and that it has become. And so it feels like a through line in a way that you saw it during the Bush administration. You saw it in the response to the economic collapse. Just this drum being beat. And I never really put it together until I started reading Christopher Stroop's stuff and heard him on y'all's podcast too. But reading his writing, and also Sarah Kendzior, and as authoritarianism is sort of on the rise here.
Yeah.
Reading more and more about that, but then Christopher's, really major contribution, I think, is connecting the dots between authoritarianism and evangelical Christianity.
Yeah.
And Christianity, at large and in a lot of ways, but specifically it seems he's tackling authoritarianism in evangelical Christianity. And that's been amazing. I mean, it bums me out because it's just like, damn, it's been happening for so long, and so many people are sort of fine with it and kind of complicit with it and didn't have that response to it ever. We can have all the responses that we're going to have as immature people, but eventually when you try to put two and two together for yourself for real, you got to come away from that shit, come away from that manipulative garbage, and see it as, the ends cannot justify the means.
Right.
Anything that sort of dips into that, is, you just stop it. You just got to be really wary of allowing yourself to be involved in movements that are fine with that kind of tactic, which the Republican Party is fine with.
Yeah, as long as they have the seats, they're fine.
They'll do anything, clearly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a bummer, because I think that the picture, just as it keeps getting filled in more and more clearly, it's really bad. And in the sense that this infection, this way of being, this manipulative, deceitful desire for power, it's in my mom, and she's not a bad lady, she's not motivated by that stuff, but she's listening to the people who are, and she doesn't have anything to defend against it.
Right.
There's nothing that's in her brain that's answering, wait a second, Pat Robertson is wrong because, X, Y, and Z. That's in her bubble, and she can't defend against it. And there's just fully 40% of the American population who's in that spot. Man, it's a bummer. So many of those people I love,
Right.
And they're, barring some kind of major awakening, they're kind of lost. The way they believe I'm lost. They're truly, truly lost. Because they can't even see what they're a party to culturally,
Yeah.
They can't watch a movie about a dystopian situation and see and sort of put the representative pieces together the right way, the way that this is going down. We're seeing it happen,
Right.
And they can't see it. And it's just so scary. But it really does put a fine point on all this stuff that we've probably, you and I and anybody else who's sort of doing this process, we've all been battling these things in our way for a while, and it just kind of rose up in a way that it was just probably traumatic, a little tiny bit traumatic for a lot of people who grew up this way, and that's what Christopher kind of says.
Right.
He's just like,
Yeah, and that's a key part of really what this project is about, is just talking stuff out, and actually talk through it, and actually this is the public component of it, this is someone that feels comfortable enough where they are to sort of let people know that, you know, they're not crazy, they're not alone.
Yeah.
You know, like, somebody else has gone through some shit like this and, like, worked through their inner turmoil.
Yeah.
And, like, and also, in many cases, have had to leave bad environments, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, just
It's
to your
so
point,
painful.
like, yeah, to your point, it's, if you're in it, like, we were in a, you know, personally, we were in a pretty fundamentalist church, and we sort of happened to be in it because of friends and things like that, even though we didn't agree with stuff. But when we left, we lost everybody. You know?
I'm so sorry.
So
I heard that
know,
you talked about that a little bit on the Stephanie Drury
Yeah. So,
episode.
yeah, thanks. I mean, it's a common story, and
Yeah.
that's what's sad about it, you know. And I'm sure that you get have gotten all manner of pushback throughout your performance and everything else, as far as, and one of the things that, just to go back to your music and your performance a little bit, one of the things that you do often is actually, you do a very vulnerable thing, and you let people ask you questions, like when you're tuning and that sort of thing. What's sort of motivated that over the years, and because I can remember that, I think, as early as I ever saw you, you've been doing that.
Yeah, if you came on it in 2001, I think I started doing that about 2000. I wanted a kind of a reliable way to interact with the audience that wasn't kind of canned or yielded the same kind of banter. And once I started doing it, it was just this endless font of just good banter. You know, if I could learn how to kind of respond to the things, just naturally, I think my tendency is to try to entertain in the middle there, you know.
Yeah.
And so it just gave me a way to kind of do that, where I didn't have to kind of revisit the same material ever, and it was just always kind of fresh.
Yeah.
And it was just that kind of device of
Yeah.
any questions at this point in the show, you know, allowed me to do.
This line is metaphysical, and on the one side, the bad half live in wickedness, and on the other side, the good half live in arrogance, and there's a steep slope with a short road. This line is metaphysical, and there's a steady flow moving to and fro.
So actually, you recently just decided to bring back the Pedro the Lion name. And so obviously a lot of people, myself included, are like, love your Pedro catalog as well as your Bazan catalog. But what led to your decision to go back to the name and start touring under the band name again?
Well, I've wanted to tour with the band pretty much the whole time. That was what I wanted. That's why I started Pedro the Lion, is because once going on tour seemed like a thing. Yeah, I just wanted to be in a band. That's what once I started doing that, that's just what I've wanted to do. So when I stopped doing Pedro in 2005, this fall of 2005, it was because the model wasn't working, basically, because I wanted a partner in it, or I wanted there to be, basically I had kind of played most everything on the various records except for bass here and there, and certainly had a hand in writing everything, even if I wasn't playing the bass, and that was a way that I had worked and kind of developed the band's sound that way. And then I was really looking for other people to sort of be regular members, and I never could keep the same people in the band. There was always some reason why it wouldn't work. Sometimes it wasn't meant to work for a long time, but sometimes it would work for a couple of years and then just would stop working for a different reason each time. But there was, 25 people in the band over the years, and when Walsh got in the band, I thought, well, this is it. This is great. I wanted somebody to, like a regular member, and we'll start collaborating and all that. And so when that didn't work, I thought, well, I wanted it to work. I don't know why it didn't work or what I did wrong, if it's down to me, to make that happen, and I don't know how to fix it, for the next time. And so I was really reticent to just get another couple of people to join up and to start touring. So I started playing solo, and thinking that I would find that clarity at some point soon, just get some distance from the band, and figure out, how to kind of reapproach it. And it took me 11 or 12 years, basically. I even kind of forgot that I was doing that at a certain point. I just was like, I got a band again and was trying to do that. And but it's just really expensive to take a band out. And Bazan, the brand name Bazan, just never got big enough to support having a band. The band shows, the band tours that we would go on, I would kind of break even or make a few, a couple $1,000 like a month's, my whatever our monthly nut is. I could, come home with like 1 month's worth of that. And it's like, well, this is the tour. If I played solo, I'd be able to pay for 4 months of living, and so I just had to kind of play solo forever. And I've been wanting to figure out a way to have a band again, and I figured out my workflow issues this year, which I won't go into, but and once that happened, I just thought, now I know what I'm doing, and I kind of solved that problem that with Pedro, why I quit the name before, and I'm trying to stay home a little bit more and have the shows be, cover a little bit more ground in terms of what I'm bringing in by playing them. And so I just thought, it's time, I think. Let's do it. And so it's been amazing. It's been really fun just internally to start revisiting some of the tunes that I haven't played in forever. And not that I'm going to be playing by any stretch all of the songs that people are going to want to hear, but we are going back all the way to the whole EP in one case. Wow. Bunch on Friend, and a couple of winners, and a bunch of Control, and Criticism is in there at the moment, but so I just it's been really fun, and also the response has been really positive, almost annoyingly so. Just like I've been like busting my ass harder than I've ever worked for the last 11 years, and you can't really get everybody to care at the same time. And then I didn't even do a goddamn thing except just say Pedro the Lion, and then everybody's like, oh my God, that's so amazing. And it's like, oh man, okay, I get it. Call it Pedro, give everybody what they want, and play all the jams and just have a good time. But then that, now that I've figured out my workflow, then I get what I want to, which is to try to continue to make records that turn me on and keep kind of developing the sound of the music that I want to make, and ways to express, myself, and to do that with a band, is what I want to do. If I call it Pedro, then I get to do that, and it's kind of a no-brainer when I really came down to it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's great, and I've loved the way your sound, and also the different sorts of content. That's such a generic term.
I said it yesterday and lamented it, but it was useful.
Yeah, the different topics that you sort of have tackled across your albums, both in Pedro and as under David Bazan, and like a lot of yours, like Hard Curse Your Branches, and all of that really was a lot of processing, a lot of the things we talked about. Yeah. And then this most recent album, Care, there's a lot of really great songs that like, I feel like I've been married 10 years. Like, there's some like long-term relationship sort of songs.
Yeah, man.
and like the way that you're sort of as you continue to change your focus, even in the things you want to sing about, it remains great.
Oh man, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the future of. I kind of have a project or a cycle of albums that I kind of have set before myself to do, and it's the right balance of, it's a direction to go in that is evocative to me and just promises endless supply of things to write about, but is also really open-ended, and I can kind of go wherever I need to go. And so it's just, I don't know, I have a really great next few years set up to just get some really good work done, I think.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, I know I'm actually catching you between a couple of different house shows you're doing. We're actually recording this in your car.
That's right.
So, just to sort of wrap it up a little bit, one of the things that I do kind of ask people is often just sort of how you feel about where you are now, both amidst all the sort of things that you're processing personally, as well as all the different exciting things that are going on with Pedro.
Yeah. Well, I had a really eventful summer in a way. Just a lot of movement, and there was a couple of ways in which work was kind of not going that great. I just was stuck in the same spot I've been in, and I was really struggling to figure out where the movement was going to come from, and also in one of my key relationships in my life. And there was just a ton of really positive movement this summer in two major spheres of my life. And it was something that I can see in both places. I was needing relief, for a long time. The last couple of years prior to this summer have been bad. I mean, I feel really bad, really low. Still working and putting out, music and doing my thing, but just really struggling and not able to really sustain. I mean, I'm just putting it all out, when I'm writing and recording, it's just like, I'm just totally maxed out, giving everything I possibly can to it. And the same thing with touring, you're up there and you're playing the show, and it's like, look, if you're not going to leave everything there, or really try to do that, then what are you out here doing? And so I've been able to do that, but it felt like it got to a point where it was taking years off my life, and I just was feeling a lot of loneliness and real just emotional pain or whatever, just real bad feelings that I didn't want to have, feeling really isolated. And so it's been good to have a season of a little bit of relief.
Yeah, definitely.
So I feel good. I wish, the backdrop of all this is basically what looks to be the end of American society as we know it.
That puts a damper on a
so
lot
that
of
kind of
things.
sucks. I mean, I guess we could pull it out, but the coup has happened. We are going to have to do another coup,
right?
If we want to turn this around. An anti-coup or whatever.
Yeah.
That troubles me, and it's agitating, because now, like we were talking about earlier, you're not just fighting some, just like how it of course goes, like when Nazism started to overtake Germany, or when any kind of fascist movement starts to come up, you're fighting against your family,
Yeah.
and you're trying to figure out what your relationship with your family is going to be, if they're going to square up on the other side of this thing, which if it's just politics and it doesn't really affect you, then you can kind of not view it that way. But
Yeah.
when and where do we put our foot down, and what does that look like when you say no fascism, no authoritarianism, no? Like,
Right.
we know where this leads. Like, you got to shut the fuck up. You know, this is not.
Yeah.
You know, this is not. Like, suddenly I'm the grown up in the room at Thanksgiving dinner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because and that sucks. I hate that.
Right.
You know, why can't they be the grown-ups too?
Yeah.
Why can't we all be grown-ups?
Right.
And know what this is?
Yeah.
Did they forget history books? Really? They didn't? I just don't. So that part bums me out, and it gets me wound up nearly every single day.
Right.
At some point during the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not good.
Right. No. It's definitely an everyday battle, and it's an everyday battle to stay motivated, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's a funny thing, because that means that they're being effective. You know, we're all feeling fatigued, and they can keep doing what they're doing. You know.
Yeah.
And just kind of keep on throwing monkey wrenches into stuff, making everything harder and harder, and it's a grim situation that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
When you really look at it, it's, I don't know, you know, just hope people keep vocalizing on social media, I guess, and then the Mueller investigation is somehow fruitful, and then 2018, if we can sort of push against all the measures that they've kind of taken to rig the elections, and I'm totally content with that word, rig.
Definitely. Yeah.
I think it's beyond meddling. I think that it's targeted, and it's
yeah. If anyone knows how to do an influence campaign, it's evangelicals, but
yeah,
that's a whole other thing.
Kevin Cruz is, you know, One Nation Under God. It's really a great read on that subject.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to leave on a totally dour note, so I do. But and I also know that you've got to get moving on to your next show. But I just wanted to honestly say, you know, your music personally for me has been in many ways like a lifeline. I don't know whether this project would have happened in the way it has if it wasn't for you being as honest as you've been, and honestly, like, I've, like, being at a Christian college when, the run-up to the Iraq War was happening, like, it was, like, I felt like I wasn't insane.
That's maddening. Yeah, that's really maddening.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
So I felt, when I would hear you talk about it, like at concerts or vocalize things, that was definitely an encouragement as I was beginning to process all that shit on my own. So,
yeah.
And for you to continue to do this, I think you're doing your fans a great service in that way for a lot of people, to be able to be encouraged to be as honest as you are. So I've always appreciated that about you. So
well, thanks
I
for
wanna let
saying.
you know.
Yeah, I mean, something that I learned the other day, I think, listening to your and Christopher Stroop's conversation, maybe that was what it was he was talking about boundaries and evangelicals, and was that on your podcast? We were talking about evangelicals having terrible
probably
boundaries for sharing personal information and things.
Yeah, absolutely.
My style of sharing in my songs comes from that lack of boundaries.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which is funny because it's definitely a liability, but in the case of it's funny because I can see that being the case, but also there's still the sense that either we still weren't talking about the right things, or we just didn't know what the right things to share were.
Right.
Because people were willing to.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in reading more about that, if that's a thing that's been written about. But
yeah.
That's what when I heard you guys talk about that, I thought, oh, that's totally me. Like,
yeah.
I don't know which things to talk about and which things not to. Songwriting helps that because I'm willing to be vulnerable and sort of overshare to a certain degree, but the editing process usually pulls it into a realm where it's just okay, it's helpful. It's not just like, oh my God, what?
Yeah,
Which I'm sure there's some of that too, but but it keeps it in the zone of being honest and I think it does flow from oversharing.
Yeah, I think there is something to that. I mean, and again, one of your lyrics is about like, these are my people, and like, and that's sort of where you come from, and there's part of it, you can take the evangelical out of evangelicalism, sort of thing, but
it's true.
So there are certain things that just, no matter where you are now, and that's sort of the framing of this is, when I talk to people, I don't care whether you're a Christian or not anymore. Because the thing that binds us together is this stuff in the past. All this stuff we went through.
The common experiences that we have. Yeah, you really can, especially once you've gotten a little bit healthy past it, and you can reminisce about certain elements and moments in your upbringing that really were just joyful.
Right.
Outside of the slow bludgeoning of your compass. But there are just a lot of really great moments and a lot of wonderful people and just so much life that was lived inside those buildings that I am not going back into. And yet I wouldn't change that. There was so many wonderful discoveries, and I guess if anything, I wish that I could have had a more complete, childhood in some of the ways that I'm coming to now, listening to more music, just being open to more things, and then listening to your body and having a complete relationship with yourself and your own, your own stuff. But man, to be able to share stories with people that you grew up with who are in a different spot than you now, but you can both agree that, TPing, the Melvin's house or whatever was, really, it was one of the funnest nights of your life. Like that's, you still get to have that. You don't have to throw it all out. You get to,
definitely.
There's plenty of stuff from back there that was like, you know what? Those were just people doing their best right then, and we all had such a good time. No one got hurt that night in the way that so many people do get hurt in evangelicalism.
Right.
But like that night was just like, we managed to just have good, clean fun,
Yeah.
And I'm glad for some of those in the midst of the kind of chaos and the really questionable teaching and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, gotta hold all of it in tension in that weird way, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, David, thank you so much for meeting me, for talking with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, totally.
It's cracked up to be